I declare the meeting open at 6 p.m. On behalf of the City of Vincent, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge that today in the public gallery we have a special guest. We have Mayor Camilo Blanco from the town of Port Hedland. I understand coming to visit and to see what happens in other councils, so we welcome you to our meeting. Thank you. And also just to let the members of the public gallery know that we do live stream our meetings over the internet and record for our website, but public question time is not streamed, so we do ask you to give some personal information, and that part of the meeting is not streamed, just so that you're aware. We will begin the live stream after public question time. Apologies and members on approved leave of absence. I have, CO, received an apology from Councillor Dan Loden due to being unwell. Everyone else is here tonight. Oh no, Mick Clark? Oh God. Okay. Our Director of Community Engagement will be attending but is just a little late. Okay, so we'll then go to public question time. So members of the public gallery, please feel free to come forward. There's no particular order, it's just whoever wishes to jump up first. We do ask that you give your name, your address and state the item to which you're speaking, and we do stick to the 3 minutes and we will time you, so please do try to keep to that time limit. And also just like to welcome people streaming from home because our live stream has commenced, so welcome to the meeting. And we have no applications for leave. Neil?
That's correct, Mayor Cole.
Okay, we do have a petition. Yes, CEO, if you could please read out the petition and also provide the options available to Council for dealing with the petition.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Council members, we've received a petition from Ms Geraldine Box of Alma Road, North Perth, along with 42 signatories on behalf of residents of North Perth residential streets, requesting that Council addresses volume and speed on Alfonso, Alma, west of Leek, Camellia, Claverton, Persimmon, Seacon Place and Vine streets in North Perth, and engages with residents to develop acceptable measures to make these streets safe and more livable, and the measures developed are included in the next Council budget round. Council members, in dealing with this petition, you have a number of options available under clause 2.24 of your standing orders. Those options are as follows: that the petition be received and essentially that nothing further be done with it. Secondly, that the petition be received and a report be prepared back to Council on that particular matter following review by staff. Thirdly, that the petition be received and be referred to a committee for consideration and report. That's not applicable because Council does not run a committee structure. And lastly, that the petition be received and be dealt with by the Council, meaning this evening, here and now.
Well, unless there are any objections, it appears clear to me that we will need to provide an opportunity for staff to review the petition and to provide a report back to Council. Any issues with that? No? Okay, can I have a mover to that the petition be received and a report be prepared for Council? Moved Councillor Hallett, seconded Councillor Harley. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Thank you. And Geraldine, are you still here? No, she's left. Geraldine, we will let you know when that report will be coming back to Council. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, we are now moving on to confirmation of minutes. We are dealing with the ordinary meeting minutes of the 4th of April 2018. Can I please have a mover to accept the minutes? Moved Councillor Harley, seconded Councillor Murphy. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Thank you. Announcements by presiding member. As you know, I usually have a few. So this week, just a few announcements. I'd just like to comment on Anzac Day March and Service, which took place on the 25th of April. It's really fantastic to see a great turnout from our Vincent community. These days we do seem to attract about 2,000 people to our Vincent service. It's a great partnership with the RSL, and we are seeking more of an involvement from other community groups as well, including our local schools. And this year was an important year in our national commemoration. It's the last year of the centenary of Anzac, and also it will be the centenary of Armistice this year on the 11th day of the 11th month. It was a good opportunity for us to learn more about Thomas Leslie Axford, who was our local Victoria Cross recipient, awarded the award during the Battle of Hamel. That story has really resonated in our community. For example, North Perth Primary School contacted us this week to request a copy of the speech so that they could talk about Jack Axford and his connection to North Perth Primary School, where his 5 children attended. So I think that having a local Anzac and the story and understanding the naming of the park has been a nice thing for our community this Anzac Day. I'd also just like to talk briefly about the Mindarie Regional Council Face Your Waste campaign, which was launched last week. This is a campaign where see-through rubbish bins are being rolled out in an effort for there to spark some conversation with the community around what goes into your rubbish bins and how can that waste be reduced. The launch did attract statewide media and really did get people talking, and I think the thing that I find quite important about this campaign is that it is being run in conjunction with the state government's review of the waste strategy, with the MRC calling on the state government to take a lead in waste education and to release some of the landfill levy funds to do this. There has been a little bit of a blockage, shall we say, there, and Mindarie Regional Council is offering this Face Your Waste strategy to the state government if they wish to take it on in an effort to campaign for better education around our waste. Also, just to note that we are calling for entries in our local history awards. This year we're having a big focus on the 20th century and to call out for not just photos but actually memoirs, and to go all the way through to the 1990s. So I think last year we had an entry of 2 children sitting in a trough from 1983. This week I will be meeting one of the people that was a child at the time that sat in the trough for a photo to promote the awards, an adult now. So it's just a really great opportunity to not only talk about our history but to really increase the archive of history that we have at our local history centre. And finally, just to mention that this Sunday we will again be celebrating the Mount Hawthorn Streets and Lanes Festival, happening in and around the not North Perth, that's from being at North Perth Local last night, the Mount Hawthorn Town Centre, along Scarborough Beach Road, down Oxford Street and through the surrounding side streets. It's presented by local town team, the Mount Hawthorn Hub. I believe over 70,000 people attended last year, and we're expecting similar numbers this year. And there's some really great events, some of my personal favourites being the street karaoke, lion dance, and a really incredible lineup of local performers. So I hope to see as many people as possible in Mount Hawthorn on Sunday. We'll now go to declarations of interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Council members, I've received several disclosures of interest, which I'll read through now. The first is from me personally in relation to item 13.3, CEO resignation. The extent of the interest being that the report relates to my resignation from the role of CEO. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my interest on the matter could be affected. Secondly, I've received a impartiality interest disclosure from Deputy Mayor Councillor Susan Gontaszewski on item 18.1. It's a confidential item. Councillor Gontaszewski has advised that the nature of the interest is that she is a personal acquaintance of one of the applicants who has applied to be a member of the city's design review panel. As a consequence, there may be a perception that Councillor Gontaszewski's impartiality on the matter could be affected. Councillor Gontaszewski has declared that she will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. A further impartiality interest disclosure I have received is from Mayor Emma Cole in relation to agenda item 9.5, Summers Street in Perth. The extent of Mayor Cole's interest in the matter is that the applicant, Leslie Thomas, provided voluntary campaign assistance for Mayor Cole by leafleting during the February 2017 extraordinary election, as registered or as recorded in the city's online gifts register. As a consequence, there may be a perception that Mayor Cole's impartiality on the matter could be affected. Mayor Cole has declared that she will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. And on that particular disclosure, council members, I'll just note that I'm aware that at the council briefing held last week, based on advice that was provided to Mayor Cole by administration at the time, this disclosure of interest was previously recorded by Mayor Cole at the council briefing as a financial interest disclosure. However, upon returning to work from leave this week and discussing the disclosures in total with the manager of governance, we have evaluated and assessed that the nature of the Mayor's interest in this matter does not pass the threshold test for disclosure as a financial interest, and consequently advice has been provided to the Mayor that in the administration's opinion it is only a impartiality interest should the Mayor choose to disclose it at all. The next interest I have received is from Councillor Joanne Fotakis, an impartiality interest disclosure in relation to item 9.4, Cleaver Street, West Perth, 4 group dwellings. The extent of Councillor Fotakis' interest in this matter is that Trent Durwood, speaking on behalf of the applicant, is a member of the city's business advisor group, which Councillor Fotakis is also a member of. As a consequence, Councillor Fotakis has declared that there may be a perception that her impartiality on the matter will be affected. Councillor Fotakis has declared that she will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. I've also received a further impartiality interest disclosure from Councillor Joanne Fotakis on confidential item 18.1, Design Advisory Review or Design Review Panel appointment of membership. The extent of Councillor Fotakis' interest in this matter is that one of the applicants also serves on the City of Vincent's Arts Advisor Group, of which Councillor Fotakis is a member. And that applicant is also a member of Leaderville Connect, of which Councillor Fotakis previously served as a member of the Management Committee. As a consequence, there may be a perception that Councillor Fotakis' impartiality on the matter could be affected. Councillor Fotakis has declared that she will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. Further impartiality interest disclosure I have received is from Councillor Jimmy Murphy on item 12.1, Asset Disposal, Vincent Community Bus. The extent of Councillor Murphy's interest is that Upbeat Events, of which he is a part owner, has sourced sponsorship funding from the Bendigo Community Bank on behalf of Leaderville Connect for the Light Up Leaderville Carnival. As a consequence, there may be a perception that Councillor Murphy's impartiality on the matter could be affected. Councillor Murphy has declared that he will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. The final impartiality interest disclosure I've received this evening is from Councillor Jonathan Hallett on item 9.3, Bulwer Street, Perth. The extent of Councillor Hallett's interest is that he lives within the consultation area for this particular application. As a consequence, there may be a perception that Councillor Hallett's impartiality on the matter could be affected. Councillor Hallett has declared he will consider the matter on its merits and vote accordingly. I've now received 3 financial interest disclosures which I'll recite for you, council members. The first is from Councillor Jimmy Murphy on item 9.11, extension to public alfresco permit timeframe. The extent of Councillor Murphy's financial interest is that he received an election-related gift from Jason Anzac of the Leaderville Hotel during the 2015 ordinary local government election, and he has since been engaged by Leaderville Connect through his company Upbeat Events to deliver the Light Up Leaderville Carnival. Councillor Murphy is not seeking any approval from Council to participate in the debate or remain in chambers or vote on the matter when it is discussed. I've received a disclosure of financial interest from Councillor Alex Castle on item 9.10, Outcomes of Advertising Town Centre Place Plans. The extent of Councillor Castle's disclosed interest is that she is currently engaged by Mount Hawthorn Hub to provide graphic design services for the Streets and Lanes Festival. Councillor Castle is not seeking any approval from Council to participate in the debate or remain in chambers or vote on the matter when it is discussed. And lastly, disclosure of financial interest from Councillor Castle in relation to confidential item 18.1, appointment of members to Design Review Panel. The extent of Councillor Castle's interest is that she has been engaged by Mount Hawthorn Hub to provide graphic design services for the Streets and Lanes Festival, and one of the panel member applicants is a committee member of the Mount Hawthorn Hub. Councillor Castle is not seeking approval to participate in the debate or remain in chambers or vote on the matter when it is discussed. And I've received no further disclosures, Mayor Cole.
That's lucky because I think you're about to run out of breath. Thank you. That's quite a lot this evening. Okay, so we will now commence our deliberations over the agenda items, and the way that we order the items is that we first go to the items that have been raised by members of the public this evening. So the first item that was raised was item 9.9, which is the...
Madam Chair, sorry, unblock items need to be done.
Yes, I should do that, shouldn't I? Be the polite thing to do. Sorry, I'll come back to item 9.9 because it is customary that we go around the table to ask if council members wish to add items, so apologies for missing that step. Councillor Hallett, Councillor Castle, Councillor Harley.
Item 12.1.
12.1. Councillor Murphy.
Yeah, 9.7, please.
9.7. Councillor Fotakis, Councillor Topol Berg.
All right, so what happens when I miss the briefing? 9.6, 9.8, 13.3, we need to nominate somebody.
Yes.
And I actually have a question about 9.5, so sorry, I will pick that one out if that's okay, which is Summer Street.
Nothing? Okay. All right, so I'll ask the CEO to run through the items that will be moved on block this evening.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Council members, members of the gallery and those streaming at home and elsewhere, the following items will now be considered for adoption by Council en bloc in accordance with the officer recommendations as published. They are agenda item 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 11.1, 11.2, 11.3, 13.1, 13.2, and that is it. Noting that confidential item 18.1 will be considered separately and agenda item 9.1 will be considered separately by Council because it requires an absolute majority decision.
Thank you, CEO. Can I please have a mover? Or you have a question,
Sorry, just to
Councillor
clarify, was 9.10 pulled out or is that on block?
9.10 would be pulled out for any financial interest.
That's correct, Mayor Cole.
Yep.
As will 9.11.
Yes. Can I please have a mover for the en bloc items? Move Councillor Murphy, seconded Councillor Gondaszewski. All those in favour? I declare the en bloc items carried. Thank you. It would have made it a much longer meeting if we'd missed that step. Okay, back to item 9.9, which is amendment to policy number 7.5.15, character retention areas and heritage areas. Can I please have a mover and a seconder for this item? Moved Councillor Topolberg, seconded Councillor Gondaszewski.
Thank you. Just a question to the Director of Development Services. Can we just get an explanation, perhaps for the benefit of the gallery in particular, the difference between a character retention area, a heritage retention area and a heritage listing, both in principle and within our scheme, and what the different status is?
Through you, Mayor Cole, I'll pass to the Manager of Policy in Place to answer that question, if that's okay.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Cole. The key difference between a character retention area and a heritage area, there's a couple of things that are different. The major thing is that any demolition that occurs in a heritage area will require the approval of the city. It's not to say that the city wouldn't approve demolition in a heritage area, just that it would require the city's approval. It also means that the city's heritage policies would apply within the heritage area. So that covers off things like how you manage the heritage value of property, how it may be interpreted in future development, and things like that to support landowners in maintaining the heritage value of their properties. And people within a heritage area would also be able to access the city's Heritage Assistance Fund to get financial support for maintaining and upkeeping their heritage properties. I guess importantly, the thing that is the same with a character area and a heritage area is that they're both intended to preserve the streetscape of a particular area through the application of bespoke policy provisions that would apply to any new development in the area, which makes sure that it's sensitive to the streetscape that's already there.
Thank you. Just a question in relation to Janet Street. So the local housing objectives, 9.1 number .5 says ensuring additions to existing buildings and new dwellings are appropriately set back so as to maintain the visual prominence of the single-storey streetscape when viewed from Janet Street. The development proposal that was refused at 14 Florence Street by the Metro West JDAP last month was clearly visible from Janet Street. Just seeking some clarity as to whether this clause has provisions only for the properties contained within, or whether it relates to, because it specifically talks about maintaining the single-storey, the prominence of the single-storey streetscape when viewed from Janet Street, whether that would have any implications for proposed developments, particularly to the rear.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole, this character retention area policy and the heritage area specifically for Janet only applies to those properties highlighted, so it does not apply to 14 Florence Street. However, the city's heritage policy would apply to the adjoining properties, and that talks about ensuring that the height and setbacks are compatible with the heritage area. So it doesn't specifically require a single-storey character, or it doesn't require it to present to single-storey to that heritage area, but it does require it to be compatible. So there are a number of provisions that relate to setbacks and heights, etc., that would become applicable to the surrounding area if Janet Street was adopted as a heritage area.
Okay, just if we just talk specifically, I know that doesn't directly relate to this item, but just that proposal is currently before the State Administrative Tribunal. What if this is approved tonight? What becomes the status of this document of the proposed heritage area, and what implications may it have for that particular development? Because obviously there's other policies that, as you rightly point out, would need to be considered, because our heritage policy refers to heritage and adjacent buildings.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. Once the policy is adopted and is published, it would become an operational policy, and any decision made subsequently would need to have regard to that policy. The difference between the current situation and the heritage policy and the heritage area, if the heritage area was adopted, isn't significant. The built form policy, local housing objectives that talk about height and setbacks are very similar to the provisions set out in the heritage area policy. So I don't think there would be a significant impact on 14 Florence Street. The development's not going to change. It will still be single-storey development to the northern boundary on Janet Street. So to the northern boundary of that 14 Florence Street development. And so it would still need to be compatible with that, whatever is proposed. So I don't think there will be a significant difference, but the heritage area policy will be an applicable policy that will need to be given due regard.
All right, last question. There were some comments from the gallery in relation to the consultant's report dealing predominantly with the odd-numbered properties on the southern side. I suppose I'm asking the question to give you an opportunity to make comment into how the staff have interpreted the report that was received, and also the calculations in relation to the street or the area as a whole.
Through you, Mayor Cole. So back in 2014, the city engaged Now and Then consultants to undertake a broad heritage assessment across the city of Vincent, which was intended to identify areas that may have potential. After the character retention area nomination was received for Janet Street, the city undertook a much more detailed and comprehensive heritage assessment of the proposed area that was put forward from the landowners in that street to understand, given that the intent of a heritage area or a character area is really about the streetscape, which requires both sides of the street to be intact and relating to each other, that assessment specifically of the northern side was undertaken. In terms of the heritage value that was identified, I think it's really about the Federation-style dwellings on the northern side of the street, and they're of a similar style and era around the 1920s, and it was determined through that assessment that architectural style buildings have historic value because of their representative of the architectural style around that time, and also providing an indication of how people lived around the 1920s. So that's the the additional work that was undertaken by the city to understand why the whole area should be included.
Just clarify, northern or southern side? I think we mean southern. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, or not?
Should I? To clarify, so the northern side was the Federation-style dwellings, and the southern side is more of an interwar bungalow style of dwelling.
Does that clarify it for you, Councillor Topol? Yes. Do you wish to speak? No. Councillor Gonchevsky?
I just have one question in relation to the assessments through you to the Director of Development Services or the Manager Policy in Place. I would like to just check in relation to the heritage assessment in 2014 and then the detailed assessment of development in 2016, just to confirm for me in relation to any changes that have been made to the streetscape since then in the subsequent years, and I guess confirmation or otherwise, as to, I presume it's confirmation as to that these assessments would still apply if undertaken today.
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, that's correct. The assessments that were undertaken did factor in the fact that development has occurred, not just since 2014, but since the dwellings were in place in the 1920s. I know there's a couple of properties at the corner of Charles Street and Janet Street, although they're outside of the area, that don't necessarily fit with the streetscape of that area, and one particular development on the northern side that is clearly of a different and more modern style of architecture. And I think that really just exemplifies the issue that we want to try and maintain the streetscape in this area and provide those bespoke policy requirements so that any new development that happens there is sensitive to the existing heritage value.
Thank you. Look, I'm supportive of the officer recommendation. I can see there has been consultation with residents. I appreciate that. We've seen some mixed support, but I can see also that there has been, that the street has been looked at both from a heritage assessment and also assessment of development, and so I'm supportive of the recommendation tonight.
Councillors, Councillor Hallett.
Can I just ask a follow-up question to one from Councillor Topolberg, just in relation to the difference between character retention and heritage areas, which you talked about, but the difference between a heritage area and a heritage listing on properties?
Through you, Mayor Cole. So the heritage listing of the properties sits under the Heritage Act, and it's just looking at identifying areas that have potential heritage value. The difference between the listing and a heritage area is that a heritage area sits under the planning and development regulations and is specific about providing statutory planning controls to protect the area, where the listing doesn't actually provide any statutory planning controls to guide development in the area. The heritage area designation does.
Councillors, any further questions or comments? Councillor Castle.
Through you, Mayor Cole, a question for the Manager of Policy in Place. Just to follow on from Councillor Topolberg's question about surrounding properties, I'm trying to get some clarification on how much weight we should be giving to the submissions that come from outside Janet Street and what the impact is on these properties compared to the properties within the heritage area, and whether they should have more weight than the others.
Through you, Mayor Cole, in terms of the proximity to the heritage area, my view is that all submissions should be assessed on their planning merits. So where a submission has raised a valid planning consideration, regardless of where that submission is coming from, it should be reviewed and incorporated into the recommendation as necessary.
And if I can just add, in relation to the properties that fall outside, really the only impact on those properties is that as a result of the city's heritage policy applying, the development will just need to respect the heritage area, not block views to the main facade of those developments, which in the context of this street is unlikely to be an issue. Just in relation to, I think the specific wording is new development of a scale and mass that respects the adjacent heritage listed, or the heritage area. So provided the development respects that adjoining property, which is really a fundamental principle in planning generally in any case, that's really the extent of the impact it will have on the adjoining properties surrounding it. I think it adds weight to the existing built form being of the scale and type that we want to see in that street moving forward, and that will clearly become the vision for the street. So it provides a lot of certainty and confidence for the decision maker that when assessing a new proposal adjoining development site, that council and the community have been very clear about what that vision is. So there's no uncertainty around it being redeveloped into R50, multiple dwellings. So I think that will make a difference, but fundamentally the principle won't change significantly.
Councillors? Councillor Murphy?
Yeah, look, I just want to make a comment. I support the item, and congratulations to everyone involved in bringing it forward. On behalf of the community, I know there's many members in our city who value our heritage and our Federation buildings, and I just want to make a point that they also enjoy them, and so it's a part of our identity, and they take notice. So I think it's a small impost on the landowner, and I do understand there is a small impost, but then obviously we're providing money for maintenance, and it's not it's not a complete impost in development. So yeah, I just wanted to make that point.
Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Fotakis?
I just want to add to Councillor Jimmy Murphy's comments that the research is there that design is a critical part of us creating cohesive and connected communities. So I think it's important that we do look at these policies in light of that. And I'm sure each generation thinks that their new modern designs are superior to past designs, only for future generations. And I know that I look back at decisions made by previous generations and I lament their lack of foresight. So I would rather be part of a council that really looks to the future and looks to trying to prevent maybe some of the problems that have been created by previous generations by not looking forward and protecting important little precincts like what we're attempting to do tonight.
Councillors? Okay, look, I will just make some comments. As we all know, achieving a character retention area and heritage area is very labour intensive for the city, very resource intensive. It's a slow process, and the reason is because there is such a high level of consultation with residents when it comes to actually taking this step. In relation to, basically it appears that the Carr Street character retention area has been seemingly accepted because we've had positive feedback on that one. But in relation to Janet Street, we have spent a lot of time on the street. I think that the research has been done both by the consultant and by the city's heritage team. And just to highlight some of the level of consultation that has happened, if I can just find the relevant section, if you can bear with me. So basically, just to reiterate, that the council does require a 40% nomination from the street, and 47% was achieved in the Janet Street situation. Since the briefing last Tuesday, we have asked questions around the original submitters, and we can confirm that all original submitters are still landowners on Janet Street. And since that time, there has been a number of workshops The first was in June 2016, followed up by April 2017. This was in relation to direct contact with the residents. There was an extended consultation period that I think went for about 6 to 8 weeks. Would that be about right? Yes, with Janet Street, because there was some further discussion around character retention versus heritage, and further on-site discussion in January 2018, and then there was further consultation during February and March. So just to give you an indication of the level of consultation that does happen when we embark in this process, it's quite different to sending out a letter where there's a development application and taking feedback. This is a very hands-on, face-to-face style of consultation. So I do believe that that consultation has really hit the mark. Just to also comment that already on Janet Street, it will be prohibited under Town Planning, Local Planning Scheme 2 to build multi-dwellings. That a heritage area is different to a heritage listing. It does not mean that you cannot demolish the property. It simply means that where you do seek to demolish, you would need to put in a development application to the city, which used to be pretty much what all had to happen for all properties until the regulations were changed in 2015, and the city has been lobbying the state government to bring back that regulation that requires no demolition without DA. So we're hoping to see that reinstated for all properties throughout Vincent regardless. In relation to the number of Janet Street residents who oppose the heritage area, Council has been given the breakdown of property owners. We're not able to release that publicly because we don't want to breach the confidentiality of the submitters, but in terms of the opposition of the 15 properties on Janet Street that are covered by the proposed heritage area, 5 objected. So in relation to the intact streetscape, the fact that it has been through an architectural assessment and a staff heritage assessment, and the fact that the consultation has been incredibly rigorous, and beyond the numbers that come back through consultation, it does go beyond that to actually set the heritage value, and whether Council, and on the advice of administration, does feel that it does warrant heritage area status. And I do believe that those those criteria have been satisfied, and therefore I'm happy to support the officer recommendation. Are there any further comments before I put it to the vote? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Thank you. Yeah. The second item that was raised from the public gallery this evening was item 9.7, number 48 Milton Street, Mount Hawthorn, proposed 5 group dwellings. Can I have a mover for this item, please? Moved, Councillor Murphy. Seconded, Councillor Harley.
Hi. Yeah, look, I just brought this forward because I wanted to give the applicant, I want to put a deferral motion forward. I want to give the applicant a chance to go back and try and bring it up to scratch. That's my reason.
Are you moving a procedural motion, Councillor Murphy, or would you like debate to ensue?
Yeah, I'm happy to move a procedural motion to defer.
Do I have a seconder for a procedural motion to defer at this point? There being no seconder, it lapses. You wish to second the deferral? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour of deferral? All right, I'm doing it. All those against? Who is voting against? You voted for it? Okay, we're deferring the item. We have that item has been moved for deferral and the vote has been carried. So there you go. Okay, so I'll now go back to the beginning of the reports and move through sequentially. So that brings us to item 9.1, which is number 4 of 190 Scarborough Beach Road, Mount Hawthorn, change of use from recreational facility to unlisted use, brackets non-medical consulting rooms. Can I have a mover for this item, please? Councillor Hallett, seconded Councillor Gonchevsky.
I'm happy to support the recommendation from admin.
Councillor Gonchevsky.
Yes, I'm supportive as well. I note the parking management plan. I think in general my preference is to probably have eyes on some sort of draft parking management plan, but I think this is very low risk and so I'm happy to support.
Thank you. Any further comments in relation to this item? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it unanimously carried. Yeah. So in moving to 9.5, number 120 to 122 Summer Street, Perth, proposed for 3-storey group dwellings. Can I have a mover for this item? Councillor Topol. Seconded Councillor Fotakis.
Thank you. My question relates to the tree retention or lack thereof. Just in the response to consultation, the applicant's comments, they said the applicant was going to thought that the retention of the tree was possible, but then there's the officer's comment. Well, the tree hasn't been retained. Can I just ask what's happened to the tree and did we have to lose it?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. The applicant has certainly expressed their hope that they can retain the tree, but they absolutely haven't committed to that occurring, and so they did not propose that as part of their application. But they have verbally advised us, and then in writing as well, as part of their response to the submissions, that they were hoping that the tree could be kept, and they will do what they can to try and retain it. In saying that, because the application did not propose it, we've assessed it as if the tree would be lost, and the landscaping that's proposed as part of the development is considered appropriate to compensate for that loss in the longer term and complies with the city's policies. So the applicant was very clear that they haven't applied to keep that tree.
Just make a brief comment. I think the architectural outcome post-advertising is a vast improvement. That being said, it still looks like square blocks to me, but yeah, I think we've got a fair way to go with our built form policy to be able to get better outcomes for these sorts of developments, but it seems that it's essential to be able to provide 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms and 2 car bays for everybody that wants to live somewhere within the city of Vincent, but it would have been nicer to see more space for more landscaping, and yeah, I won't make any further comments on the architecture, but it's certainly a better outcome than the original proposal.
Councillor Gonchevsky, Councillor Fotakis, are you the seconder? No, you don't wish to comment. Are there any other comments on this item? Councillor Hallett.
Just a question. There's the reference to a detailed landscaping plan being provided before development commences. What happens if that doesn't occur?
Through you, Mayor Cole, if the landscaping plan is not provided prior to development commencing, then the applicant will be in breach of their planning approval, and the city will have the option to commence to commence compliance action against the applicant, which may include prosecution depending on the applicant's response, whether they address the issue or not, and ultimately the developer could be liable for up to $2 million under the Planning and Development Act. So there's quite steep penalties under the Planning and Development Act, which is certainly a significant deterrent to applicants proceeding without undertaking the landscaping plan and then ultimately putting the landscaping in place in accordance with that approval. So the city has quite a robust process for enforcing compliance once matters are raised, as in this case we would be checking at the building permit stage that the landscaping plan's been submitted and that it's been approved and all the issues addressed in accordance with the conditions. So we have that process as well as addressing any complaints that come in from adjoining properties.
Anything further, council members? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried unanimously. Okay. Item 9.6, number 18, Scarborough Beach Road, North Perth, proposed change of use from warehouse to recreational facility. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Topol, seconded Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, I'm going to move to delete condition 1.4, which is the limiting the number of members. I don't see how we can, and B, don't think it's a valid planning condition. I couldn't care less if they've got 300 members, as long as they've got the 26 plus 3 staff on site at one time. I don't see how or why we're seeking to have control over the number of members of the business. So I'll move to delete that condition.
I have a seconder for the amendment to remove condition 1.1.4. Sorry. Councillor Murphy seconding. You don't wish to say anything further? Councillor Murphy, do you wish to talk to the amendment? Councillors, any further comments? Councillor Gonchevsky.
If I could just seek some comments from the Director of Development Services as to why that condition was put there in the first place.
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. The reason for that condition was to ensure that the applicant didn't end up in a situation where they had more people trying to attend their premises at one time, more than the 26 patrons that are limited by condition 1.3. So it was just practically to try and set up a situation where they didn't have people knocking on the door and they weren't tempted to go over and above that 26 patron number. It was a simple way of managing the numbers so that there's a sustainable number there that doesn't create parking issues in the immediate vicinity.
Councillor Gonchevsky.
Thank you. I think Councillor Topol makes a good point. I can also appreciate the sentiment of wanting to ensure that we don't see 50 people turning up for a 26-person class or activity, but I am supportive of the amendment.
Director, if I might ask you a question, is it a valid planning consideration to put the cap on the membership and not just the occupancy?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. It certainly is a valid condition to impose, given the development doesn't propose any car parking and has a shortfall. So that was the basis for it. In saying that, condition 1.3 does limit the numbers, and the applicant will be required to ensure that there aren't more than 26 patrons on the premises at any one time. So how they go about that, if condition 1.4 is deleted, is they could still put a limit on the membership themselves. There's nothing stopping them from doing that, but I do consider that condition to be valid as it sets it up for success, basically. But there's nothing stopping the applicant doing that in any case, and they'd still be bound by condition 1.3.
Thank you. I don't support the amendment. I think that the shelf of 55, which was increased from 35 after some consultation with the applicant during the intervening week between the briefing and tonight's meeting, does mean that there's not going to be an oversale of membership, so that then becomes an issue in terms of management. I know could be a view that that's up to the applicant to manage, but given that there is a car parking shortfall, I'm comfortable with condition 1.4 remaining, and I don't support the amendment. Are there any further comments?
Through you, Chair.
Councillor Harley and Councillor Fotakis.
I also don't support the amendment. If I'd realised, I might have asked for it to be imposed on a few other things, but I think that if there's parking proposed here, I think that would be different, but it is up to the business to manage their own business. But given that it is such small numbers that can attend, and if it is a valid planning consideration, then I don't support the amendment.
Look, I'm in support of the amendment. Recreational facilities are notorious for having members that are very keen in the beginning and then notorious for not turning up for most of the year. So I think to actually impose a limit relies on all of the members being quite dedicated members and attending the facility regularly. I think it actually the intent, while it might be to protect the owners of the business and their ability to meet condition 1.3, I think will actually has just as much a risk of contributing to the failure of the business.
Councillors, Councillor Hallett.
Just a question. Are we aware if there's going to be registration for group classes, etc., that people would be pre-booking at the venue?
Through you, Mayor Cole, no, I'm not aware whether or not they are pre-booking the classes. I know there's personal training occurring, and that is obviously pre-booked, but I'm not sure whether the classes are pre-booked or not.
I do support the amendment for reasons to Councillor Fotakis, that apart from first few weeks of January, gym membership does not equate with attendance, and so yeah, I'm happy to support it.
Are you asking a question?
Yes, I am. Although curiously, I will actually ask the CEO if I can speak, because I moved the amendment but didn't speak to it. So I'm fairly sure not, because I can't reserve my right as the speaker. But I am asking a question. I am asking a question in any event. So my question to the Director of Development Services is the concerns, in your view, if this condition is deleted, are the provisions of condition 4 and the requirement for a parking management plan combined with the maximum numbers sufficient to limit the numbers of people who will be knocking on the door and parking in the area? Or if there were issues that arose, would they be able to be dealt with through the provisions of condition 4?
Through you, Mayor Cole, yes, I think that the condition 1.3 and 4 are sufficient to manage the parking and the numbers on the site. Condition 1.4 was added as part of the application. The applicant set their maximum number of members. At the time it was 35, which they've now changed to 55 in order to justify the parking shortfall. So for that reason the condition was added, but I think that 4 and 1.3 combined would be adequate to manage the parking and membership, not membership, the number of the patrons on the site.
Any further comments? Okay, I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? I declare the amendment carried. We're back to the substantive.
Thank you. Just further question in relation to the parking management plan. So the parking management plan, it says there has to be a parking management plan, but then all it talks about is basically telling people not to drive. It doesn't actually talk about managing the car parking, other than the first sentence which says, shall submit a parking management plan to the city for approval, and then which details. Can we assume that the provisions of, particularly the hours between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m, and then I would assume, say, 6 p.m. till 10 p.m, which would be the sensitive residential hours in the adjoining street, can we assume the parking management plan will adequately deal with instructions to members and patrons during those hours, or does that need to be specified by amendment to the condition?
Through you, Mayor Cole, there's nothing stopping the parking management plan from addressing those issues, but it was not one of the specific. It's not one of the specific requirements set out in those dot points. I think, given the amount of parking or the availability of parking at those times, it's highly likely that the patrons will be parking as close as they can to the premises, and so won't be parking up the further up that residential street. But in any case, if council considers that that should also form and be a requirement of the parking management plan, then it would be prudent to add a dot point to state that. But as I said, there's nothing stopping the parking management plan from addressing that issue, and we'll certainly be requesting the applicant to do that. I think it would be helpful to have that information in there in any case.
And last question, and I'll make a comment as well, but just last question. The approval runs with the business or with the property in relation to the parking shortfall?
Through Mayor Cole, this approval relates to the property, so it's an approval for a recreation centre with these conditions. So if the operator changes to be a different operator, then the approval will continue to apply. So it's not specific to the current operator.
So, but it's specific to the use. So if a cafe was to be there with a 6-bay shortfall, does it run with the building? Under our, I know it deals with intensity of use in the policy, but the 5.2 bay shortfall in commercially zoned property, formerly or currently local centre, with 2 5-storey DAs approved directly opposite. If the business changes, does it run with the new business?
Through you, Mayor Cole, no, it runs with the recreation facility. It doesn't run with any other business.
Yeah, look, I think
can I just ask, are you continuing with your questions because you are the mover, and if you do, are you still seeing this as moving the item? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I moved the item, moved an amendment, and speaking to the item.
Okay, that's very long. Thank you. We got you on timer.
You haven't spoken to it at all. I only moved an amendment. And then the amendment was the length of time. But thank you. I think the circumstances that have led up to DA coming to us in this way 12 months down the track, and I think if it's to the applicant, I will be supporting the officer recommendation. I will speak briefly about the condition that has now been deleted as well. I think that we don't tell cafes how popular they can be or can't be and start trying to limit their number of social media contacts or otherwise. And I think limiting membership to if we limit the number of people that are allowed in the building, that's sufficient, and I'm comfortable that the conditions cover that. I do have some issues with the 5 point, and it's highly unusual for a shortfall of this size to be approved in a commercially zoned area, given what's happening in and around that area currently and projected over the medium term. But quite unfortunately, we have the circumstance where we've got 12 months on the board of the facility operating, and we know exactly what the impact is. That's been circumstantial, and so for that reason, I will support the officer recommendation. But I do note that the parking shortfall is significant, given the land size and the location of the property.
Councillors, any further comment? We're back to the substantive now.
I'm not supporting this and the officer's recommendation. There's a couple of reasons for that, and I had hoped that the amendment would get up because I believe that would go some way to mitigate some of my concerns. But and just on another point, we actually seek to limit customers on a regular basis, and I think that I would like to know of any other examples where we have limited membership. It would be interesting to know whether we could use that in the future for any applications as well. So it's good it's been brought to our attention. This area has got significant parking problems already. We went through a lot of pain with Hardy Street, which is in very close proximity. There's still pain being experienced around that area in regards to an incredibly popular cafe, which caused us to have to put parking in Hardy Street. It's caused us to have to review parking there, community consultation. It is a burgeoning area. The vision for that part of Scarborough Beach Road, it's going to get busier and busier. There's a major residential property going to be built on Scarborough Beach Road. We do expect more of that to happen, and I think we have to be realistic about how many businesses we're going to approve and then say, it's okay, you don't have to provide the parking, we'll provide it for you. And you can just park on the residential streets, which is where, if there are up to 26 members there at one time, they will be parking on the residential streets, and those residents are already starting to ask about whether there should be greater time limits put on there because of the popularity of a local cafe. All things we want to encourage. We do want to encourage that activation, but at some point we're going to have to start saying to businesses, you need to choose sites where you can provide parking, or you need to ensure that there's enough parking built in, or you need to moderate the size of your business to ensure that you are not expecting that there's just going to be 26 bays there at a point when 26 members do show up. So I think if I heard right, the applicant themselves has submitted a membership cap as a way of smoothing this application through. Obviously, the amendment now that cap that we had actually increased to 55, that's now gone. So unfortunately, without that amendment having gotten up, I can't support this, and I won't be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillors, any further comments on the substantive motion? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? All those against? I declare it carried. Okay, the next item that we're dealing with this evening is 9.8, submission on the Welga draft climate change policy statement. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved Councillor Topol, Berg, seconded Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Where are we? So when I support the intent of the policy, I support much of what's in there, but I think, saying it bluntly, a lot of the fluff that's been written around it does not sound like Walga, does not sound like local government. It sounds like just political grandstanding. And when I eventually get through to the right section there, I'll pull out some of the comments that I noted. But I think if you pulled out the crux of what is in there, I think that it represents the aspirations of local government and the capabilities of local government to be able to provide to make reasonable change. But I think that things like talking, where are we? I'll get some of my comments up there. Talking about a particularly significant policy vacuum within the West Australian government with negligible demonstrated or coordinated leadership or long-term planning. I don't think that has a place in policy statement of a local government association, which only exists by the act of the state. I think that when it talks about that the need, it effectively asks for an emissions trading scheme, which is quite clearly out of the remit of local government, and there's been federal elections that have been won and lost on the basis of that issue, and I just don't think that we need to be discussing that in particular. I do accept that in the absence of it, that there is discussion about different ways in which we can achieve some of the goals that are in there. So, yeah, I just think some of the language that's in there is very, very heated and very pointed, and I think that it doesn't do the policy itself any great service. I think that the comparative politic within a policy as well, talking about the state government should follow the examples of other states such as New South Wales. I find that extraordinary to be writing those things in policy. You should be asking for what you want, not making comparative, but they spend this much and we only spend this much. Again, those things shouldn't be written in policy. So, look, my personal preference, and I don't know whether it would get up here or certainly whether it would get up at Walga, is to say the principles are right, but the whole thing needs a rewrite. That's my personal view on it, so I'll listen to the debate and decide how I will vote. But the dot points in there and the aspirations are good. The desire or near demand for federal or state government to fund the changing of to LED lights throughout local government, I think, is again misplaced in policy. I think we should be talking more in principles rather than actually putting our hand out in a policy and saying we expect for this to be funded. The intimation that local government is best positioned to deliver on a lot of matters that will impact on climate change globally, I think is misguided. I think it potentially adds another layer of bureaucracy. There are some areas where we would be good at it, but I don't think it identifies those. I think it broadly says if there's money, we want some because we think we'll be good at being able to deliver. And I also do respect that the Vincent experience is vastly different to other areas within the state and within Walga's membership, including a lot of coastal areas and areas that have far more significant, far broader physical areas and far more climate-related issues that affect their daily operations. So I accept that it is broad, but I just find the wording of the policy to be extraordinarily politically motivated, and to me that doesn't sit well. I think it belittles the actual intent, which is to say we as a sector want to stand up and do great things to help the country move in the direction in accordance with its obligations both to future generations and the obligations it's made in terms of agreements it's signed up to globally. So I'll listen to the debate eagerly.
Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I support the recommendation from administration regarding this. It is a strongly worded policy, and I think that's pretty much in line with some of the things that we've passed at this council. So broadly, I'm very supportive of the draft policy. I have less concern, I guess, than Councillor Topol around some of the fluff that might be in there. I think we do have a significant vacuum at other levels of government, and so it's okay to name that. And in particular, there's things that we could do that need enablement from other levels of government. So I think that needs to be strongly in there as well. So, but apart from that, yeah, I'm happy to support it.
Councillors, Councillor Harley.
I'm not going to support the policy. I think it is an incredibly disappointing document. I won't repeat what Councillor Topol has already raised concerns about, but this does not read as though it is a policy. And I think that local government, and sometimes I think Welga has been criticised for inaction, and this to me reads as a document laden with inaction. So I personally think, and I will make my views known through my own mediums that I have with Welga on State Council and on the zone, that I think they need to do better, and I think they need to be specific. And if this is the policy which is going to lead all of local government, then I think we need to have some smart objectives in there, and I think we need to have an actual action plan in there, and I don't read this document as that. I think that it is very difficult being a peak body, so they have a very challenging role in doing that because of their regional, remote, coastal, inland and urban councils, all of which have their own issues and often very, very starkly competing views about matters and issues. And there are times when it is like chalk and cheese at Welga. There is just no coming together of the views from around the room. And so I understand that from a peak body they sometimes produce a more generally worded document, but if they're serious about this, and we're all happy to take this seriously, as are many other councils, then I think it needs to be a more action-orientated document, and I think they should cut the politics out. I don't think and I've read hundreds and hundreds of policy documents over many years. I've written them, I've reviewed them. Policies do not contain that type of language. They are quite procedural. They're almost practice statements. That's how good policy is written anyway. It gives people direction, guidance, and action, and it gives an authorising environment, and I don't think this policy gives that to us.
Excuse me, can I do it? I'm sorry.
Excuse me, Mari, no, you cannot.
What happened to Carr Street? I don't know, I'm still waiting.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were about to interject in the climate change debate.
No, I just want to know because I need to get going.
It is unusual to take a question from the floor, but the Carr Street retention area has been adopted, Mari.
Oh, I see.
Congratulations.
I understand that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, where were we? Councillors who wishes to continue debate on the Welga climate change policy? Any further questions or comments? No? Okay, look, I do have a few. Look, I do have to say, as a former policy writer of the state government, I do read this and cringe in terms of its format, its language, its structure. I thought that it was not a particularly shining moment in Welga policy writing, that has to be stated. It's not a particularly professional job. I struggled with the idea of actually sitting down and trying to rewrite it, which is not my role. It is a non-binding policy. I think that some of the issues that were picked up in our original submission to Welga are still very sound and not really reflected in the policy around, I think under 5.1.2 in our submission we talked about the city recommends that Welga provide guidance and examples on practical climate mitigation steps and measures both corporate and community-based that are available to local governments, and this will help local government understand what other local governments have achieved and evaluate their options. Also talked about, our submission talked about recommending that we call on Commonwealth and state governments to actively support local government to take mitigation actions without placing undue responsibility for the delivery of such actions on local government, and to partner with and resource local government to deliver community emissions reduction programs. So I do feel that some of our original submission probably hasn't been as strongly reflected as I would have liked to see in the policy, and it is, I mean, it probably was open to me to put an amendment on the table to reinforce that. I haven't done that because how much time do you spend on a Welga policy when you have so many other issues to deal with as a mayor and council of a very busy inner city community and local government area. But in saying all of that, I don't feel in a position to vote against it because I do not disagree with the intent of the policy. I think where we actually get to the dot points and the actions that are recommended, that they are sound and that they, personally I don't have an issue on calling on an emissions trading scheme. It just seems to be, personally to me, the right thing to do. But I just think that I'm not in a position to oppose it because I think that the actual actions and the statements where you're not sort of entering into the cloudy commentary are sound, and short of actually giving it the time of day and sitting down and rewriting it as the City of Vincent, I just don't think that that resource was available for this job, and I don't feel that necessarily the second round was fully cognizant of all of the advice put forward in our submission. But I'm not a perfectionist on these matters, and that is not in any way to imply that other council members are, so please do not take it that way. But there's not enough there for me to oppose the policy if this is what is on the table at this current time. Councillor Topol.
May I move an amendment, please?
Of course.
So changing recommendation 1 to supports in principle.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Just putting the words in principle.
Okay, can I have a seconder for the
1.
amendment? Seconded, Councillor Harley. Do you wish to continue?
Yeah, well, it'll be up to the administration to take on board the comments in the debate and to frame their submission, but I just think, for me personally, to be able to put my hand up for it, I'd rather support it in principle than actually supporting the statement, and so whilst it's semantics, it's enabling me to vote for it because I do agree with the principle of it, but it also gives the administration the opportunity in their submission to capture some of what's been highlighted as some of the concerns about the language in the policy.
Councillor Harley?
Yeah, ditto.
Councillors, any comments on the amendment? I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare it carried unanimously. We're back to the substantive. Is there any further commentary or questions? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? I declare it carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item that we're dealing with is item 9.10, outcomes of advertising town centre place plans. We'll just wait for Councillor Castle to vacate the room. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved Councillor Gondaszewski, seconded Councillor Topol.
Happy to see this go out into the world, and I think, rigorous ground-up consultation, and good to see a plan for activation, engagement and investment in our town centres and a recognition of the unique nature of our town centres. So, happy to support.
Councillor Topol.
Look, it's, I guess, part of a broader movement in planning in general, but it's something that we've embraced at the City, and we've done so by resourcing it properly, and not only we being looked at in terms of the work that we do, but I guess the part of that recognition is that they've gone and pinched one of our place managers too to go and work elsewhere. So I think that look, this is it's unique in a small local government area. I guess for the benefit of our gentlemen in the gallery from Port Hedland, we're only 11 square kilometres, and we've got 5 distinct areas that we plan for separately. I think that's quite unique in something of our size, and it's certainly something that, as I say, is part of a broader movement in planning. But I'm really pleased with the way that this captures the not only the intent of what we are looking to do as a city and as a community, but obviously with North Perth there being there specific, it really captures the community and the businesses there. So, yeah, happy to support it.
Councillors?
Through you, Chair.
And then Councillor Fotakis, you can be next.
Oh, we're in competition tonight, sorry, Jo. I also am very happy to support this. I think it's a huge achievement for the city. I'm particularly pleased to see a focus on the nighttime economy. A number of years ago, before our latest Mayor John Kerry banned councillor travel, I had the opportunity to attend a fantastic conference, which I think we should be going to every year, personally, with the then Mayor Lana McTiernan and Jeremy. And it was, the nighttime economy was on everyone's lips, but not a lot of people were doing it. The City of Sydney had its own entire nighttime economy strategy, which they are well and truly into at the moment. It's working well in some places, not working well in some others, but the point was they had a plan, and a lot of the councils that attended that took that away from that conference because they understood that they had great town centres during the day. Brunswick Street was one of them, but it had started to really suffer at night, and they realised they needed a different plan for what happened in their cities at night, because they really are two different types of economies and different audiences. So I think that's a really positive step, and I think unless City of Bayswater are online watching us tonight, we may well get ahead of the City of Bayswater on this one as well.
Councillors, any further comments? Councillor Fotakis.
Like other councillors, an excellent document, and I think when others outside of Vincent and even those in Vincent look to the successes that have been achieved over many years, and it just keeps getting better and better, I think the quality of this document really reflects the substantial hard work that's been dedicated by a lot of people within the staff. I'd like to say thank you to all the teams that contribute not just their work time, but their heart and soul into the successes that we see with our events and community. Like Councillor Harley, one of the aspects that I was really glad to see was the after hours activity as well, and also to further to that, and it's a big issue for us in town centres, and that's advocating for live music venue protection, and I think that's going to be an issue for all councils where we've got live venues, to really look at how we're going to protect these institutions which really do contribute quite substantially to the unique fabric of a lot of areas, and no more so than the City of Vincent. So great document, and I'd encourage anybody out there that has really seen the great work that's been done in our place activity to read it and be inspired by it.
Thank you, Councillor Fotakis. Are there any further comments on this item? Look, I would also just like to say that it has been a good journey to get to this point, and a lot of work has gone on behind the scenes, as David Doy, our outgoing place manager of one of two, we should also mention Georgia Lawrence, who's had a big hand in this too, mentioned to me this week. Sometimes the things that look simple are the hardest to achieve, and it has been a lot of work to get to this point when you think about the fact that we're in the planning phase of place management, and that before all of this came the formation of town teams, the inspiring of community members to come together, working with the town teams to create action plans, which have then led on to this, in amongst all of our other principles around urban design, nighttime economy, striving for unique differences and highlighting and building upon those differences in our 5 town centres. This is quite a complex body of work that's been distilled down into what will become 5 very distinct place plans and an overarching place plan that talks about what it is that we're trying to achieve. So, It will eventually form a volume of a place plan and 5 specific town centre plans, and at this point we've got the place plan and the North Perth place plan, which I was very pleased to talk about at North Perth Local last night. So just again a big shout out to Policy in Place. A very fond farewell to David Doy, who leaves us this week and goes on to do similar work over at the Town of Victoria Park, and also to thank Georgia Lawrence, who's also works very diligently in this area, and also Stephanie Smith, that goes without saying. Thank you, Stephanie, you're awesome. Okay, are there any further comments in relation to the place plans? No? Okay, I'll put all those in favour. Declare it carried. Thank you. The next item is 9.11, late report, extension to public alfresco permit timeframe, Leederville Town Centre. Can I please have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved Councillor Fotakis, seconded Councillor Gontaszewski.
I just think it makes sense, so for that reason I support it.
I love your work. Councillor Gontaszewski.
I'm in complete agreement with Councillor Fotakis. Thanks.
Any further comments? I completely and wholeheartedly agree. It's working very, very well. Why would we change it? I would just like to make some comments, and I'm trying to catch the attention of the Director of Engineering, because I think through the consultation process there has been this very interesting idea that's been brought forward by Leederville Connect, which is to look at eventually making the area of Newcastle Street from between Oxford Street up to the Carr Street intersection a piazza, and I think it would be interesting. That's probably a long-term vision, but I think it would be interesting to look at the site itself and what sort of issues there may or may not be if we were to look at raising to grade that area of Newcastle Street and trying to look at creating a shared space there in the first instance, and a space that could potentially be easily closed for smaller scale events other than the festivals and the fringe events that we've been happening where we close more of the town centre area. So I just thought that it would be worth mentioning at this point that as we're going out to community consultation on what the future of the taxi rank is, you're likely to receive a submission from Leederville Connect on that broader area, which would include the Newcastle Street former taxi rank, but also that area and what the potential is there moving forward. So I just thought I'd put that out there. Any further comments? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? Declare it carried. Thank you. Okay, this evening we do not have any engineering items, and all of our corporate services items have been moved on block. So we will move to community engagement. Item 12.1, asset disposal, Vincent Community Bus. Can I have a mover for this item? Councillor Harley, seconded Councillor Castle.
Thank you. Pardon me, through you, Chair. I support the recommendation. Obviously, to dispose of the bus. I think it would have been, there's been a number of issues over the years about how accessible our seniors programs were, because the bus had been in use for 10 years and it was not mobility accessible, even with walking frames, let alone wheelchairs, etc. So that's just a product of the decision that was made at the time that it was purchased, obviously with the change in focus, which I think has been an incredibly positive thing, to be far more inclusive and in particular to address a number of the issues to do with accessibility. So I think that it's time for the bus to go, and I acknowledge that the bus was purchased from a donation by the then Bendigo Bank. I've watched all the email traffic and the discussion with this with great interest. There were clearly no documents at that time, which I think reflects on both parties to this agreement, but the bottom line was a transaction occurred and the city was given a donation, and with that donation we obviously bought a bus, and I think the community, for the 10 years that it was in use, for the many activities that the seniors went on, that's primarily what it was used for, rather than any other activities, and so that time has passed. So I support the officer recommendation to dispose of the bus.
Councillor Castle.
Through you, Mayor Cole, I support disposing of the bus for the reasons that Councillor Harley has outlined. However, I notice there's a number of amendments that have been flagged, so I would defer to the councillors who are proposing those to clarify what method we'll be using to dispose of it.
Thank you, Councillor Castle. Councillors, Councillor Topol.
Yep, I'm happy to move the amendment on the green, please, which, if I get a seconder, I will speak to.
Is there a seconder for the amendment on the green? Councillor Hallett.
There's no issue about disposal of the bus, from what I understand from everybody, and I'm just going to make my thoughts clear and concise. Councillor Harley's 100% correct. There was absolutely no documentation that was signed or agreed to by the city, but my personal view, we've been presented with a document with a signature on it from the 22nd of June 2008. So we either take there's three possible views. One, that the document wasn't created at that time, it was created after. I don't subscribe to that view. The other view is that the document was created at that time, and then we then have the issue of how we deal with it. To me, there was a clear understanding from the people that donated the money to the City of Vincent in order to purchase the bus that, and I'll quote from their document from 2008, if the town of Vincent ceases to use the vehicle as intended, it will be returned to the North Perth, for the official name, Community Financial Services, who will take over all associated cost and storage responsibility. So for me, it's clear that at the time we were given the donation, there's no question it's our asset, there's no question in my mind that it has to be disposed of according to the Act, but it wasn't a donation that was given that we then decided to go and buy a bus. It was clearly given for that purpose expressly, and the people who gave it, I have no hesitation in subscribing to the view that they had an understanding that if it wasn't to be used, that it would be returned to them at no cost. I know there's been discussion back and forth with administration about various measures and different ways in which it could be returned. My personal preference is that, given, and there's been some very big personalities both at the City of Vincent and the North Perth Bendigo Bank over the years, and there's been a lot of things that have gone on in the community. There's been donations to different things, there's been support of the city, there's been all sorts of things back and forth. My personal view is that it is a healthy community-minded relationship that we have had with the bank over the years, and that they do contribute significantly to the local area, a large part of which falls within the City of Vincent. I see nothing to be gained by seeking to sell the bus to them when it was clearly the understanding of the organisation at the time that the bus, if it wasn't going to be used, would be returned to them. So under the provisions of the Act, we would need to give public notice of the intent to dispose of the vehicle, and the amendment that's on the table says that we would do so for $1. That complies with the Act. We would then have to give public notice and give due consideration to any feedback received in relation to that. But yeah, I don't see any benefit to the city. The measly dollars we're talking about aside, I don't see any benefit to the city in principle of burning that relationship on the clear understanding that that was not the intent of the organisation when they gave it to us, and I don't think we would feel very comfortable if the shoe was on the other foot. So ask councillors to consider returning the bus to the people who gave us the money to buy it, considering that they gave us the money on the understanding if we didn't need it, that's exactly what we would do.
Before I move to the seconder, I'm just conscious of the fact that Councillor Topol is referring to a letter that's not attached to the council report. So just for the sake of the public record, I would just like to hand over to the CEO to outline. I know that you did read it out, Councillor Topolberg, but it was quite quickly, so I might just hand over to the CEO to talk about the content of that letter and the circumstances around that letter being either held by the city or presented to the city.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. The discussion with Bendigo Community Bank regarding the community bus probably started in earnest around mid to late 2016 and continued into the early half of 2017 in particular. There was much toing and froing at the time between administration and personnel representing Bendigo Bank in relation to what the bank believed were these conditions precedent. I had personally, as well as the Director of Community Engagement, asked Bendigo Bank representatives on numerous occasions throughout 2016 and 17 to please furnish the city with evidence of the conditions precedent that the bank was relying upon, which it was seeking to exercise those conditions in order to have the bus essentially transferred back free of charge to the bank on the premise that the city no longer had active use for it. That correspondence or written statement of conditions precedent, which are the bank's words, not mine, were provided for the first time to the Mayor and I in a meeting that we had with Mr Catania and Mr Ian Crawford, the Chair and Deputy Chair of Bendigo Bank, on the 12th of June last year. And the discussion that occurred in response to that was that it was difficult for the city to accept the veracity and validity of that correspondence, simply because in that kind of transaction both parties need to be in agreement to any such conditions. There was zero evidence of that documentation anywhere in the city's record system. We did conduct multiple extensive searches throughout the city's records database, which failed to furnish us with that correspondence that Councillor Topolberg and the bank have been referring to. And on that basis, following that conversation with the bank and through subsequent discussions, the bank essentially put to the side its earlier demand for the bus to be gifted back to the bank free of charge on the basis that it was no longer being used by the city, and instead the bank has most recently come to the city with a proposal to purchase the bank for the sum that's described in the report. The city's position still is that there is no evidence on file anywhere in our corporate record keeping system of the said conditions precedent ever having been received, or even if they were received. So yes, prior to 12th of June last year, because that was the first occasion that that documentation was provided to us. At no prior time in my requesting of any such document was it provided until that date. Through you, Mayor Cole, I'm happy to read it if you would like. It's a letter signed by Mr Ian Crawford, Deputy Chairman of North Perth Bendigo Bank, dated 22nd of June 2008, which I just note for the record is 2 days prior to the ordinary council meeting of the 24th of June, at which time council resolved to approve the use of the $120,000 donation from the bank to purchase the bus. The letter is appearing on photocopied North Perth Community Financial Services Limited Bendigo Bank letterhead and is titled Conditions Precedent for the Delivery and Operation of the Community Bus between Town of Vincent and North Perth Community Financial Services. And it goes on to state the board of the NPCFS, which is North Perth Community Financial Services, is pleased to deliver a 22-seater community bus to TOV for the use and benefit of the Vincent community. The community bus is provided with the following conditions. 1. The bus is to be for community use and changes for its use be at reasonable costs to the prospective users. 2. Regulatory fees, insurance and licences to be paid by the Town of Vincent. 3. Storage and maintenance of the bus to be TOV responsibility. 4. Bus will be branded with Bendigo Community Bank logo and replacement when necessary by NPCFS at its cost. And 5, if the TRV ceases to use the vehicle as intended, it will be returned to the NPCFS, who will take over all associated costs and storage responsibility. This agreement will allow the TRV to provide on additional service and amenity to its ratepayers and residents.
Thank you, CEO.
Madam, just in line with standing orders, I'd like to make a personal explanation, if I may.
Certainly.
Just that the request for the CEO to refer to that it can be seen to imply that the reason for the amendment is on the basis of the veracity of the document. I was only referring to the document as evidence of the fact that it is my view that the directors of the bank at the time believed that the bus was to be returned at the point that the city was not to use it. So the document in itself, there's no question in my mind that was never presented prior to the date in question, but it was just alluded to because as evidence of my belief that the directors of the bank did believe at the time that they were giving it that it would be returned if it was no longer to be used.
Thank you, Councillor Topolberg. The reason that I refer to the CEO for that was because we were referring to a document that wasn't an attachment to the report, so it was really just to put that on the public record and to have the CEO to outline the content of that letter in more detail, and the CEO has provided some additional information, but that was the intent of me seeking that information and not to imply anything else. I'll go to the seconder, Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I'm somewhat undecided about this, but I wanted to hear some of the discussion. I tend to lean towards not supporting the amendment given that the bank's offered a higher amount for the bus, but I'm keen to hear some other thoughts from particularly the councillors that have been around for longer and have some memory of circumstances.
Through you, Chair. I am strongly not supporting this amendment, and I'll outline my reasons. First of all, I just want to say in any of my questions and comments, I'm not questioning the veracity of that document that's been read out to us. But I just want to touch on a number of matters, not least of which is to do with transparency, Local Government Act, and our commitment to ensure that we do an appropriate asset disposal that ensures that we make best use of what could in fact be ratepayers' funds. So I do not support this bus being sold back to the Bendigo Bank for $1. I wholeheartedly support us going out in an open and transparent tender process, and I support getting the absolute highest price. And I do that because we can't control what the buyer does with this bus after. No matter what they say in any statement they make, in any offer to purchase, that they're going to use it for to cart around, I don't know, rescue dogs, to go and pick up homeless people, to deliver food, whatever they say they're going to do. It's not that I would doubt that, but we can't hold them to it once they become the rightful owner. So the reason that I do not support this is because I honestly believe that had that document been sent to us, we would have a copy of it. I'm just going to ask a couple of questions just to double check about some of the checks that were done. So, CEO, you've mentioned that you've searched all of the records that you've got in terms of the paper records. Was there any discussion at council at the time that this bus was purchased in regards to any discussion between the CEO, the then Mayor, etc., with Bendigo Bank about this arrangement to give the bus back? Was there any discussion at council? I've got a few other points. You could do them on block. Was there any documentation through the audit committee? Was there any documentation, a caveat or anything placed on it as an asset of the city? Were there any minutes presented by the Bendigo Bank so that the directors, who not just believed in the arrangement but actually did their fiduciary duty, and did they have any minutes at their own board meetings when they made the donation of $120,000 to the city? If you're able to answer that, and then I'll continue.
Through you, Mayor Cole, administration's multiple searches of the record system was confined just to records held by the city, so we didn't go back and test the minutes or the validity of those conditions precedent with the board, as you had suggested. Certainly, one of the key starting points for our examination of just trying to locate this petition's precedent document was to review the level of detail and information that was included in the report to Council on the 24th of June in 2008, and quite simply identify that if there were essentially strings attached or conditions applying to that donation, they ought to have been included in that report to Council, because it is that report alone and its attachments which informed Council's decision on the matter at that particular time. I can't speak for any verbal discussions that may have ensued surrounding that exchange at the time, because there's just no evidence that we've been able to uncover. As I said, it was very extensive. We had multiple staff across multiple areas doing the same types of searches across all of our known keywords, property addresses, customer details. That uncovered virtually anything and everything to do with Bendigo Bank, any kind of communication. A communication of that sort, in my view, is quite substantial. It's appearing on official Bendigo Bank letterhead. It would not have been easily disregarded by staff who were managing the record-keeping functions of the city at the time. So, as I said, I had staff reporting directly to me do that examination. I know the Director and his staff independently did the same. We liaised with our record services staff to identify if we could locate that particular record, as much so that we understood, because bearing in mind that the first time it was provided to administration was early June, or around early to mid-June last year when we saw it, because we had no prior evidence of it, that that would have been a very critical component of the information that should have been reported to Council at the time, but was not referenced anywhere in the written documentation upon which Council's decision appears to have been based.
Thank you, CEO, and back through you, Chair. Had there been a Council minutes that this former Council had knowingly accepted that donation and purchased a bus on the basis that we would continue to use it, I'd still question 10 years down the track with, how long is a piece of string? However, in the absence of anything, I just think it would be an extraordinary move to be selling this bus for $1, which is just peppercorn. We may as well give it away for 50 cents or 10 cents. It means absolutely nothing, and there'll be no benefit to the ratepayers if we do that at all. The Council minutes are particularly important because I'm assuming the CEO at the minimum would have obviously been involved in that discussion. I could be wrong, but I'm assuming that a donation of that value would have involved the CEO. It possibly involved the Mayor, maybe not. But I would imagine that if that had been a discussion and an understanding of the then CEO, that they would have definitely made mention in the Council minutes and made councillors aware of exactly the obligation we were entering into. It needs to be understood, yes, we purchased the bus, but we've also been maintaining it, paying the insurance, paying the registration and doing all those things. And we did use it in accordance with what we'd intended to do. We used it for a very long period of time, and it's only been in recent time that we haven't. And the reason why we don't keep this bus, we're not wanting to keep this bus, is because our people with mobility issues simply can't access it, and that's a problem for a city that is meant to be inclusive. So I would ask councillors not to support this amendment and to move ahead with the disposal of this bus and ensure that ratepayers, that we are able to put something back into our funds and get the best price possible.
Councillors, any further debate on the amendment? I'll put the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? I declare it lost. We're back to the substantive. Any further debate or further amendments? Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. In front of you I've got an amendment, essentially, I'll read it out, requesting that we go to a tender rather than an auction. And part of that tender evaluation criteria to include consideration of community social benefits rather than solely financial return. So that's essentially, I I do take into consideration what Councillor Harley said, is that we do not have any means to be sure that the community bus will be used for community purposes beyond its disposal. But I think it would be. But I think that's still needs to be taken into consideration. I'm not actually sure in terms of the process of a tender whether we can hold a tenderer to account in terms of promised social benefits and community benefits in that process. Would someone be able to help me with
Yes, or who would like to answer that? Okay.
Through you, Mayor Cole, in short, not really. The only way that council could effectively achieve that level of security is if council were to enter into some kind of contract arrangement with the purchaser of the bus for certain things to be achieved once the ownership transfers to that new entity.
Councillor Murphy?
Look, I still, geez, I don't know if I want to complicate things. Look, I'll just put the amendment as is, based on as written, and yeah, so maybe go from there.
Before taking, I just want to seek your approval to amend clause 4 where it refers to all relevant auction details to change that to tender. I think that one's just been missed. Are you happy to move it with auction
yes.
being replaced with tender?
Thank you.
A seconder for this. Thank you, Councillor Castle. Councillor Castle, do you wish to speak?
Yes, through you, Mayor Cole. I'm in support of this amendment. I think I take the point that we can't actually enforce the social benefit criteria that we might take into account in the tender process. But I think this solution strikes a balance between our responsibilities to dispose of this asset responsibly to our ratepayers, but also recognising the generous gift that was given to us by Bendigo Bank and perhaps opening the door for them to purchase it back in accordance with some of our earlier discussions. So I think this is a good balance between the options that we've had on the table tonight.
Councillor Hallett.
Through you, Mayor Cole, to perhaps the CEO or other relevant directors. Can you comment just on the level of resourcing by admin that would be required for reviewing tenders, etc., versus just an auction?
Through you, Mayor Cole, the sending the asset for disposal via auction is the far simpler method in terms of level of effort required, for the simple reason that it is a very quick and clean disposition. It's a matter of engaging the auction house, setting a reserve if need be, and the auctioneer then accepts the highest and best bid, and that's the transaction done. In going through a tender process, we obviously need to determine, as Councillor Murphy's amendment has identified, evaluation criteria. Given that the evaluation criteria is not going to be just highest and best offer, it is intended through this proposed motion or recommendation number 2 to include consideration of community and social benefits. That being the case, administration will have to give some consideration to what that looks like in terms of an evaluation criteria. We would spend a little bit of time drafting something up, would refer it out of session to council members to provide some feedback on those, because it is the selection criteria embedded in the tender that forms the basis upon which the tender needs to be lawfully evaluated. That's not to say that council doesn't reserve its right to accept whatever it sees as being the most advantageous tender after the tenders have closed and been assessed. But there is more work involved in this than just going to dispose the bus through auction.
Through you, Chair. I don't support this amendment, and I'll use my full minute allotment to explain why. I would ask councillors to separate out the history of the bus and how we came to have possession of the bus and our obligations to dispose of our assets in a way that ensures ratepayers get maximum benefit back and that there is the utmost transparency. And in this particular one, I would say not just the perception but the actual transparency, because there is this cloud which has been raised about a letter for which we haven't received and about an obligation that was allegedly entered into at the time we got this bus. A tender process, I'd certainly want to be looking at the documents and seeing what percentage we are given. We're giving different things. This is not like when we do a tender where we're asking for services, where we're able to look for local content and a whole range of other things. These are very subjective things that we're going to be placing into this tender document if this amendment was to get up. I'm not sure how many hours have already been spent on this matter to look for documents to get this to the point where it's being brought to council. But frankly, we could have sold this bus quite a long time ago and had the benefit of the money in our finances. And instead, we're still here in April 2018. We're having a debate about this. I don't feel any obligation on behalf of the community to Bendigo Bank. I'm sorry, I just don't. I feel an obligation to ensure that we dispose of our assets in the same way that we dispose of all of our other assets and of the dozens and dozens and dozens of vehicles and heavier vehicles that we dispose of over the years, and that is by putting it out to auction, not spending any more officer time than is absolutely necessary, getting the highest price possible and just moving this whole issue on. And I would ask councillors to look at what the officers have recommended and to ask councillors not to support this amendment and ask councillors to support the substantive amendment as it's been presented by the officers, because this represents the best outcome for the city. It represents good governance and it represents a good proposal in terms of the disposal of an asset. We have already made a concession in here that Bendigo Bank will be advised courteously that the vehicle is to be sold, and I believe that's the only concession that we can make in regards to the disposal of this bus.
Councillors, any further comments on the amendment on the orange before I put it? Look, I will comment. My thoughts on this was that given that we had an offer on the table of $20,000, regardless of who it's from, I was open to consideration of a tender process which acknowledged that $20,000. The requirement to include consideration of community and social benefits rather than solely financial return, that's probably a bit more than what I had considered. I understand the intent and I think it's honourable, but I'm just thinking that in terms of the disposal of the bus, and given that we have gone through a process where we've actually talked to some services about the value of the bus in its current format and its lack of accessibility, etc., I don't think it could simply be used in, in a straightforward way. That sort of remains to be open. So I'm probably speaking in an area that I don't exactly know, but I know that we have had some discussions around usefulness to, say, food delivery and etc., and that in its current format and without any accessibility, it's it's actually at this point in time, probably because of its lack of accessibility, a cost. This is why it's become a cost to the city rather than a benefit to the community. So I'm not so sold on the tying in the community and social benefits, particularly given that that would require a full assessment. My inclination was more to acknowledge the $20,000 offer has been received and to put that forward as part of a broader tender process where we can acknowledge the offer, and that in part sets a reserve price, for want of a better description. But I think this is probably going a little further than I had planned, and I won't support the amendment. Any further comments on the amendment? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour? All those against? I declare it lost. We're back to the substantive. Any further comments on the substantive? Any other options that wish to be presented? Okay, I'll put it. All those in favour of the substantive? I declare it carried. Oh, sorry, all those against? Sorry, my apologies, Councillor Topolberg. I declare it carried. Okay, we're now dealing with item 13.3, resignation of Chief Executive Officer. And we do need to, through this discussion and debate, select at least a third member to sit on the CEO recruitment panel. Can I have a mover and seconder for this item? Moved Councillor Harley, seconded Councillor Gondaszewski.
Sorry, Chair. Obviously, just move the motion. I'm going to put my name forward to be on the selection panel, and I'm hoping that obviously it will occur in the shortest time possible, in line with the time frame put forward by the current CEO of his resignation and exit from the City of Vincent.
I just think, just in order to help the debate, it might be useful at this point to call for an expression of interest from council members. We currently have proposed for you tonight that myself as Mayor would be the chairperson and that Deputy Mayor Susan Gondaszewski would be on the panel. We do currently have a third position that remains open to council to debate whether it should be 3 or potentially more, but I think it would help at the outset to have a show of hands of council members who are interested in at least one vacancy. So I have 2 council members that are interested. Yes?
For councillors that aren't on that group, I assume there'll be other opportunities to feed into selection criteria and I guess some of the things that we're looking for a new CEO.
Look, I think so. I mean, this can be done. I think, the panel is really there to sort of sort through and to make recommendations to council. But just to give you an example, at the moment I am on a Mindari Regional Council CEO selection panel, and I can't divulge the details, but we do have, through that process, we have permitted other council members to attend as observers to the panel meetings. Shortlisted candidates are being invited to a panel meeting. Council members are being invited to observe those presentations as part of a second round of interviews, if you like. So there are certainly opportunities for other council members to be involved, and I think that this initial step is really about the panel coming together and making some recommendations to council, so that this is going to be a step-by-step process. If council doesn't like the recommendations of the panel, ultimately they are the decision makers. They can seek to amend, to add, to subtract. So I think this is something that we will see a number of reports back to council and opportunities for other council members to attend either as observers or to provide some form of feedback along the way. Obviously that remains for the panel to make those recommendations, so I don't know what that form that will take at this point, but it will certainly be something that will be coming back to council for approval. So, Councillor Topolberg.
Just make a comment. Whilst there's only been 2 nominations, I just want to state from the outset that I would be opposed to increasing it beyond the number that's there, assuming there'll be an external consultant. I think for any person sitting in an interview to have more than 4 people in a room is unnecessary and overbearing. I think, having sat through the recruitment process for the current CEO and numerous times elsewhere other than Vincent, I do think that it's, obviously the potential candidate has to be able to shoulder the responsibilities of dealing with the room that they walk into, but I think that more than 3 elected members in a room is unnecessary. So regardless of the makeup of the panel, I just want to be put it on the table that I would be uncomfortable with recommending that more than 3 elected members would be in a room in the interview process. So whether that's a broader panel, and obviously it's important for each of the potential candidates to meet with the panel, but I'm comfortable with the numbers that are there.
So the office recommendation is for 3 panel members. If council is of a view that there should be a 4th, it will have to happen by amendment. So at the moment we have 1 position available.
Through you, Chair, I'm happy to move an amendment that the panel be increased to 4.
Can I have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Gontaszewski. Any debate on this? Councillor Harley, Councillor Gontaszewski, councillors, Councillor Topol. No further debate. Okay, I'll put the amendment that we increase the panel to 4 members. All those in favour? All those against? I declare it carried. So we're back to the substantive. We have 2 vacancies. We have 2 members that have expressed an interest. I just do want to be very upfront and say that this is going to require quite some time commitment. I don't know about other panel members, but I won't be able to devote time in the evenings at all times to this. And I'm just wanting to let panel members know that I think there will be a requirement for at least a mix of some daytime activity. And I just wanted to put that out there in case that precludes anyone, or if that means that someone has to consider leave options, etc. So that I just feel I have to be quite upfront about that, particularly preliminary meetings I think is scheduled to have with our HR manager who, so just putting that out there. So we have 2 council members who have nominated. They are Councillor Harley and Councillor Murphy. I'll put that now. All those in favour? I declare it carried. Thank you. That leaves just the confidential item for us to deal with this evening, so I will need to have a mover and seconder for us to go behind closed doors. Move Councillor Heller, seconded Councillor Murphy. All those in favour? Thank you.